Welcome to AI at Work. I'm Elijah Sauce. I'm a serial entrepreneur with 28 years of experience in tech, and today I run an agency that builds AI solutions.
Hey, I'm Kevin Williams. I spend most of my time helping companies figure out how to actually use AI. Not in theory, but in the work itself.
Hey, welcome to the show. Doing something a little bit different today. My buddy Kevin Williams is off doing some fancy consulting stuff for Utah's government, AI and government regulatory, actually for a couple days because he was also supposed to speak at the University of Utah's MBA program for their MBA Hub Day on the future of work in AI, and he got pulled into these other meetings. So I went in there and did that for him. And it was really interesting. And I thought I'd share with you guys today what I shared with this MBA class, which is really tricky because people go back and get their MBA for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's just continued education right after their undergrad degree. Other times it might be somebody who is already climbing that corporate ladder and wants to get another professional degree in order to get a salary bump. Or it might be somebody looking to start a business for the first time or get additional knowledge for a business they've already started. So when it comes to AI, obviously that is changing the landscape for all of those different scenarios. And it's also really difficult to think about what do you tell a class full of people when you have no idea whatsoever what their experience has been with AI. So I had to start with the assumption that it was very little. And I didn't want it to be like that, but when I asked a bunch of questions throughout the different slides of who's heard of this or who's tried this or who's using this, it was maybe one or two people every time. And of course, the same one or two people every time that were actually using AI. A little bit shocking. I think that we all get inside of our own little universe where we feel like because we're so immersed or hands-on with something, the rest of the world has to be doing the same. Just not always the case, especially with something that just seems to be everywhere all the time. So I'm going to call out what is on these slides because I hate it when some sort of voice medium starts calling out a bunch of visuals and you have no idea what's going on, where it's relevant, and maybe this will be the kick in the pants that I need to start doing stuff on YouTube so I can share this presentation there as well. So really fast, the things that we covered in this little talk were just my quick background. I think you guys may or may not know that already, how we got here with this whole AI business, where we are now as far as what the Frontier Labs are doing and all the things in the Frontier Labs orbit. Why there's still skepticism around the impact this is having, how we practically apply some of these tools, and a little glimpse into the road ahead. So I've spent almost 3 decades in tech, which is crazy. And I got a late start, and that makes me feel super, super old every time I reflect on that. I started and sold a few businesses, and my current endeavor is an AI-led design and development agency that actually builds out these complete solutions. My whole tech journey started in robotics. So when you think about AI and automation and the future of all the humanoid robots to come and everything else, I got a really early look at that. And this slide is Terminator, and I go on to talk about how the beginning of my journey was working at Cyberdyne on the T800. And then I say I'm joking, of course, and there's the little movie clip of the Terminators fighting people and things blowing up and robots with guns. So am I just really that old? I thought Terminator, everybody's seen Terminator, gets the reference. A lot of just shocked looks as if my previous work experience was at some clandestine military tech endeavor. It wasn't just boring old robots that usually did mechanical assembly and pick and place and making circuit boards and everything else. So we built a lot of Teslas, not very many Terminators though. And I've got a little clip of a tornado here because every time you talk about AI, it's like trying to report the weather during a tornado. You try to get a beat on the conditions, and then all of a sudden the roof is gone and cows are airborne. In other words, things are moving really, really quick. So I always throw in the caveat that anything that you hear about AI today might be irrelevant in a month, a week, a year, It's one of those rates of change that we just can't really predict right now. But we can look back. We can look back and we can say that AI has been an evolution. So there's this thing that feels like it was just all over the place overnight. All of these companies with the crazy valuations and people cheating their way through college or using it as leverage at work or getting replaced at work with their jobs. But the truth is that this has been something percolating in the background for decades and decades now. So if we go back to the 80s, we had this rule-based AI, right? Depending on what you want to give AI the label to. Very if X then Y logic. Think your thermostats or spam filters, stuff like that. It's all rule-based, right? Then we got into the 2000s, and this was starting to take labeled data and run it through some algorithms and give you these smart outputs. You can think about how Netflix recommends movies to you. Because you watched K-pop Demon Hunters, you might enjoy Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? It's using labeling data and your previous viewing history to give you those recommendations. 2020s, we started getting into deep learning, and this was taking a lot of the same label-based rules, but applying it to massive unstructured data. And this changed the game. This started giving us things like deep learning, processing, audio, images, video. We started to get facial recognition, self-driving technology, speech recognition. All of these things were inspired by the architecture of the human brain, why it's called neural networks. And then that led us into today, where we have generative AI. So this isn't just aggregating data, it's producing new assets, right? We get images and we get videos and we get graphics. Some better than others, but we are producing things, we are generating things, hence generative AI, that didn't exist when we put in the initial prompt. So how does that play into our everyday life, even if you're not involved in all this? Well, it's kind of like the microprocessor in the early 80s, right? They were embedded into almost everything that we used, but nobody really knew they were there or how they worked. And AI is starting to creep up like that as well. Smart homes, even if you have one of these like Nest thermostats or Ecobee thermostats, it's using AI, right? It's very likely inside of a lot of people's cars already. We've got all of these personal assistants and note takers and things that use reminders and email filters. Workplace automation is starting to get very, very popular in a variety of different ways. And then we have all of these different productivity tools that are running loads and loads of AI, whether you are Team Google, Team Microsoft, Team Apple, there's tons of AI running in back of all of these products. So when you kind of break it down into, well, what is the AI that we have today versus this really crazy promise of the future that's going to flip the world upside down? Well, that's AGI. So today's AI it's narrow and it's task specific, but that's changing quickly. AGI, this artificial general intelligence, has always been the long-term goal. It's not today's reality. But so far, everything that we've built today is doing such a good job that it fools a lot of people into thinking that it is a general intelligence. I once heard somebody say that having narrow AI is like having a genius inside a box, but only if you yell the right question into that box. So we're living in this really weird time. We've got all of these tools that are built for narrow tasks, but they feel like something more because you can type this sloppy prompt into ChatGPT and get back some very reasoned and fluent prose. It could be bad poetry, but it could be really good code or helping you debug code or explain calculus or talk like your therapist. And that feels like intelligence. And that's where a lot of the confusion begins, because we're seeing a broadening of narrow AI, not true general AI. And today's large language models are trained on such massive amounts of data that it's gotten really, really good at mimicking reasoning and conversation. But it's not quite there yet because it doesn't understand what we're saying. It can't really generalize across totally new tasks without that human intervention. It doesn't have goals, doesn't have curiosity, doesn't have self-awareness. But it keeps getting faster, it keeps getting better, it keeps getting even better and better at mimicking. And that's why you've got companies like Meta literally throwing $100 million salaries at the brightest minds, because whoever cracks the AGI code first will have a head start on everybody else in a way that some predict will be impossible to catch up. So as we continue to look into the future here, there was this guy, I've got this slide up here now, of this fellow Alan Turing, and he posed this question: can machines think? He made a test called the Turing test. It's in a lot of AI science fiction lore. And the real brilliance of this test is that it sidesteps the definition of intelligence entirely, and instead it focuses on behavior and perception. In other words, can a machine convince us that it's human? And back in 1950, this was all theoretical. No computer came close to what you have in your pocket with your Android or Apple phone. It's a completely different world. So when this test was imagined, it was imagined as this text-based exchange. Ironically, the first really impressive models that we saw, like, we're just typing in text. And today's LLMs like ChatGPT can pass casual versions of the Turing test without breaking a sweat. So the problem with the test is it's too easy to pass by today's standards, right? We don't have a super intelligence, but in a 5-minute conversation, GPT can appear to be human, but that doesn't mean it really understands anything. And that's where we get into this next guy. I've got a slide up here of Ray Kurzweil. And he is a futurist. He's the director of engineering at Google. He's one of the founders of Singularity University. This idea of a singularity that he really popularized is the point where machines can start to redesign themselves, right? Where you have recursive research and improvement on these models. They could potentially turn it into a bit of a runaway train, depending on who you talk to. But this is what we're calling super intelligence, or one of the definitions of it. It's a very quick leap where a new machine intelligence is born. It's faster, broader, more capable than the entire human species combined. And then what? That's the question, right? So, a singularity, these things happen in nature, black holes, waterfalls, right? Anything where you have a point you cross that is completely unpredictable to know what's going to happen on the other side of it. If I'm floating down a river in my canoe, mathematically, I could predict the velocity of my vessel, the direction of it. I could get a beat on the trajectory, kind of see when I'm going to hit the edge of the waterfall. But as soon as my little boat tumbles over the edge, it's impossible to predict where it's going to land. As soon as we cross some kind of recursive model or a super intelligence, or one entity that has more smarts than the whole human race combined, it's unpredictable to know what little quirks it may have and where it may take us, right? And so that's the idea of a singularity. So when does this happen? Kurzweil predicted 2045 as a likely arrival point. Some believe that all the things we're looking at today with Gemini and GPT and Claude are stepping stones on that path. Others say that we're kind of already arriving there, that it's a very gray area. And then you have people who say that we're nowhere near real autonomy or agency or general reasoning, and that it may never happen, right? I like to ask AI itself when it thinks it's going to happen. And surprisingly, and I keep doing this over the last year or so, I've been getting a pretty consistent answer that says it's plausible by early to mid 2030s, unlikely by 2029. A real singularity, that real tipping point, likely no later than 2045. So it agrees with Kurzweil. I don't know, it may have gotten that information from citations from Kurzweil. So, then what happens, right? And that's the big question. And there's a lot of different opinions on this. And it's, I've got a slide up here of painter Bob Ross painting a robot, a humanoid robot that I generated with AI. It really, there's this growing consensus in Silicon Valley that really believes that we should be setting up universal basic income now, because most knowledge work as we know it, and a lot of other work, including logistics, transportation, are all going to be taken care of for us as a species, and we've got to be doing something else. And we still have to get food and do all these other things. And what does that look like? Are we just all going to be artists? There are a lot of people who believe that. And the next slide, I'm going right back to Terminator that nobody seemed to recognize. Because you have people like Eliezer Yudkowsky. I always mess up this guy's name. He wrote this book, If Anyone Built It, We All Die, where he doesn't think there is any scenario after artificial general intelligence that really keeps humanity in the game, and that's going to be it, right? So again, all predictions, lots of assumptions, nobody really knows. And that's the only fact we have today, is nobody really knows. So I've got this next slide here that just has a handful of the different large language models that are popular today. And when I asked how many people were using these, again, shocking, like a couple hands went up. We've got OpenAI, we've got Meta's model, we've got Anthropic and DeepSeek, DeepMind, we've got X, Mistral. Yeah, it's, somebody did ask, well, what's the best, right? You've got kind of market leaders, you've got adoption, you have time in the game. But it has been a pretty crazy game of leapfrog, especially lately, right? Where a lot of them kind of felt the same, where you say, oh, this one's so much better for creative writing, or this one's so much better for coding. And then all of a sudden, OpenAI really started taking the lead with GPT, and then Gemini 3 dropped, and everyone was going crazy over it, including Kevin and I. And then we noticed all sorts of regression or difficulties using it. And so again, the answer is to really test all this stuff for yourself, because yeah, some of these really do shine in different areas, but how you prompt them, how you get what you want, like that's pretty consistent. That's a lot of the stuff that we teach and go over. And I've got this next slide. It's tons and tons of other AI products, right? And I think this is where things get a little confusing for people, or it feels overwhelming that everything in the world is being powered by AI. And look at, there's hundreds of companies and different SaaS products, and they all want you to use them. And well, if we've got all these frontier labs, why do these exist, right? Well, they're what we call wrapper applications. And in other words, they are providing a layer with a specific service over these foundation models like ChatGPT to give you a better experience for the thing that you're trying to get. And I've got lots of examples up here, everything from note takers that you would invite into your Zoom or Google Meet or Teams call, like Fireflies, for example, or Fathom. Then we've got other wrappers that help you write code better, like Replit or Cursor. Then you've got things like Grammarly that are just following you around the web and every application on your computer, helping you with spell check, or things that sit on top of your CRM. If you're on Salesforce, it might be Agentforce. If you're on HubSpot, it would be Breeze. So the reason why these things exist and the reason why they leverage other models is that these frontier models are very expensive and time consuming to make, right? We're talking $100 million plus, a decade of research and evolution. Whereas if I'm one of these companies, I want to use this technology and just point it at directly at a user in their specific use case. For example, say I want to make presentations. Gemini 3 all of a sudden just started knocking out amazing slide decks, right? And there's even a connection to put it into Google Slides. It's still pretty tricky. It still doesn't work that well. If you make a mistake, it's very hard to go back and edit. But you have a platform like Gamma, and Gamma will produce slide decks for you much, much better, and they're editable, and it's easier to get context in there because that's all it does, but it's being powered by one of these LLMs. And why don't they just make their own? Well, again, it's an insane amount of money and time, whereas it can just call the API, in other words, the little computer-to-computer messaging system behind the scenes, for fractions of a penny every time it uses that tech to power its product. So today we already have industries that are being completely turned on their ears by AI. Just to name a few, in healthcare, AI is detecting early stage cancers with their scanning technology more accurately than most radiologists and much, much faster. In finance, AI is flagging over $1 billion a year in fraud using real-time anomaly detection with explanations, not just alert flags. I mean, it's incredible. And then in transportation, You have companies like Waymo with their autonomous vehicles that have driven over 7 million miles without any fatalities whatsoever. And in retail, 35% of Amazon's revenue is coming from their AI-powered recommendations. You bought this water bottle, you might want this little accessory for the gym, or this, or this, or this. And I believe that stat was even before they really fully implemented Rufus, which is their chat assistant that I use all the time now. I'm not going to be bothered to go through and read reviews when I could just say, hey, Rufus, give me a collection of all the 1-star ratings, but filter out anything that said that they didn't like the product because the box was damaged or something, Don, and give me the truly horrendous stories so I could weigh my purchasing decision right here. So that alone is huge, right? It's really changing things in a material way there. And this next slide here has 4 different areas of skepticism that bubbles up. So if it's doing all these incredible things already, why is there still so much public pushback? For every person who thinks that AI is going to save the world or maybe take it over, there's another who thinks like, this is just a dumb fad. It's a trend. It's going to pass. This isn't going to go anywhere. It's just a big pump and dump for the valuation of a bunch of new companies. I get it. Like, this is understandable. Even though I'm inside of it, the rationale for this thinking is valid. It doesn't make it so that this is true, that it's a fad or it's all going to go away. That I do not believe whatsoever. But at the top of the list, we've got hallucinations because, these large language models can make things up, right? It's a known limitation. Hasn't been fixed yet, gets called out all the time. It's even in a lot of the warnings when you get an answer. When I am in my car and I'm talking to Siri through CarPlay, I'll often route to GPT because Siri is just not really good at much at all right now, actually. And once it routes to GPT, after whatever answer it gets that I'm asking about, it says, large language models can have hallucinations. Please make sure to check your facts. Like, there's a little disclaimer at the end of it, which is really interesting. So this happens when models are uncertain or lacking grounding in verified data, or in other words, AI can be a really good bullshitter because it wants to give you the answer, right? It wants to fulfill the ask, and that can be scary in a high stakes situation. OpenAI has since rolled back a lot of what it will give you in regards to legal advice or medical advice. And the other thing is decision making, right? That kind of rolls right into decision making. AI doesn't have any real emotional context. It can spot patterns and make recommendations, but it doesn't understand ethics the way that a human does. Not even close. So people say like, well, it never will, right? I don't think that's true, but today it can't, and so they dismiss it. And then there's the whole bubble conversation that I don't want to get too deep into this, but if we kind of unpack the fundamentals of a bubble, it's any time that you've got something that has a value associated with it, which is just completely detached from its true economic fundamentals, right? We saw this in the dot-com bubble. And it does kind of feel like year 2000 all over again. You've got all these new companies with insane valuations. Just like before they were taking any word and throwing a .com at the end, now we're throwing a .ai extension on that domain to get a better valuation. And there's a lot of that same, this math doesn't math, like the economic fundamentals, the revenue, the earnings, the profitability of these companies doesn't match the values that they're getting. But it's not like the internet went away after the dot-com bubble burst, right? It just cleared a lot of the crap out of the way that wasn't really providing much value. And you had a lot of massive, massive companies born out of that. And so, again, I understand because when a company is burning $15 million a day, right? And then also says within the same week, by the way, we need $1.4 trillion over the next 8 years for the infrastructure to keep this all going, to hit all of our goals. You don't have to be a data scientist, just call out the fact that those numbers don't quite jive, right? So it's a justifiable argument. And this next slide has one word on it, and it's yet. Because all of these arguments, all of the pushback really is where we are today. And one thing Kevin and I always say on this show and to everybody that we talk to when we hear complaints about AI shortcomings is that this is the worst that it's ever going to be, right? This is it. We are living in an amazing time, and next month is going to be more amazing, and next year is going to be even more amazing, and 5 years from now, I have no idea what's going to happen. But yeah, it's not always right, and it makes stuff up. Can't always execute great creative output yet. Can't truly reason. The monetization use cases just aren't really that strong with so many of these businesses, or compute is just too expensive. That doesn't make fiscal sense yet. Right? Or it's never going to take my job. gotta keep educating yourself, because yet is the truth there. Or it can't even render can't even render hands with 5 fingers. Right. And so I've got this slide here that I love this meme that went around just 2 years ago that had a series of hands that were rendered by AI that just have absolutely nightmarish outputs where everything is twisted and there are thumbs growing out of wrists. And the title says AI accepting the job. It's these handshakes of these human hand monstrosities, right? For some reason, it just couldn't do this. It just couldn't render human hands that looked real. And even when it did, there was this really strange, uncanny valley where the hands didn't look just quite right. And then I've got this slide from one of our marketing partners of these 3 images that were used as ad creatives just last week. And they are stunning. It was this race car campaign. And he got just unbelievable ROAS, return on ad spend with these. I think it was something like 10 or 11x. The video assets were just as impressive. And you know what? To get something like this just a couple years ago would have involved a casting call and getting talent in-house and really expensive cameras and line producers and storyboards and tons of editing and drones, on and on and on. These commercials, probably at least a couple $1 million to make. And these were produced in an afternoon with prompting just 2 years later after the nightmarish hand debacle. So this is where it's going. Just going back to this idea that you see something and it's not working very well, guess what? That's the worst it's ever going to be. And it could be completely fixed. It could be completely revolutionized within weeks. We just don't know. So part of this is really staying open-minded to the possibility of innovation here. So that said, why is there still so much hate about this? Why do we have such a negativity bias? Every time AI gets something wrong, there are a lot of loud voices that say, "See, this is just never going to work. This isn't going to happen. This too shall pass." So the reason why is it's hardwired into our nature for survival. We evolved to look for perceived threats, to exaggerate downside, and we did that in order to stay safe. So I think autonomous vehicles are a great example of this because A, it's an emerging technology. B, it's running loads and loads of AI. And C, when something bad happens, everybody hears about it and says, you got to be crazy to let one of these Teslas drive you around. Do you care anything about your life, right? So this slide has this news story, and the title is Cartoon Prank Crashes Tesla, Awkwardly Rehashes NHTSA Investigation Findings. So what somebody did was they put a painting of the road on the road so that it looked like it kept going. One of these, old school illusions that you might see in a Roadrunner cartoon where the Roadrunner tricks Wile E. Coyote into going off a cliff by having him run through a painting, and the Tesla fell for it and it crashed right into this thing and it got global headlines for it. And, if you look at the big picture of autonomous vehicles and just look at last year, we had almost 40,000 people die in traffic crashes in the US alone, right? And why does that happen? Because at any time over 660,000 drivers are using their phones while they're driving. They're looking at the screen in their lap and not the windshield right in front of them. That's not good. And then you have over 1 million arrests for driving under the influence every year. And then you have almost half of drivers who self-report that they struggle to stay awake while driving. So when you look at autonomous vehicles compared to that, I've got this little video clip of me getting into a Waymo in San Francisco with my family. And when I was there about a year ago, these cars were everywhere. And some of them had somebody in the front seat, probably one of the Google employees, making sure this thing didn't run into somebody in an intersection, or just taking notes on how it behaved. I don't know what they were doing in there. But when I came back a year later, there were people in the Waymos in the back seat, and there were even more of them, and they were taking passengers all over the place. More than Ubers in the city. I forget how many more. They had a massive share of all of the rideshare platforms were now the autonomous vehicles. And why, right? Like, why would you get in a car driven by a robot? That seems so scary, but they have 85% fewer injury crashes. They have a 96% reduction in intersection collisions. I like this stat because I ride a bicycle. 82% fewer cyclists and motorcyclist injuries. 92% reduction in pedestrian injuries. But here's the real kicker. Of any incident they had, 90% of those occurred because of a human error. Not somebody who's programming the car, but somebody who ran out into an intersection or ran a red light or went through a stop sign or was texting while driving. So when you ask these questions of, is it perfect? It's not the right question. The right question is it better than a human? And in this case, yeah, it's over 90% better. And these are high stakes life and death situations. And listen, I grew up in San Francisco. I hate driving there. I got in this thing with my family and I felt infinitely safer than I ever have inside of any of the ride shares. And this thing drove through rush hour, construction zones, a convention center, flawlessly, absolutely flawlessly. Super, super impressive. And that brings us to the AI Supercycle that we are currently in. What is a supercycle, you might ask? Well, this slide has a diagram of a hockey stick growth curve. And at the bottom of that, we've got stuff like fire, right? That gave us warmth and some light. And then we got steam-powered engines and electricity, gave us even more warmth and light, and machines and other things. Made our little existences a lot more comfortable and convenient. Then we started the hockey stick part of that trajectory, and we got the internet. We got the microprocessors, we got the internet, we had this global connection and communication happen, and it started changing the way that we do business and interact with each other. And then we've got today, we've got generative AI, right? And so this curve represents the fact that with every one of these technological breakthroughs, the actual curve gets steeper and steeper. And when you consider things like the Singularity or artificial general intelligence, that curve becomes indistinguishable from a straight line up. Almost defines the singularity in itself, right? It's like this unpredictable exponential trajectory that just looks like you're on this rocket ship growth curve. But AI is a very different technology than any of the other super cycles that we've experienced as a species. It's spreading wider. It's impacting nearly every white-collar role, as well as some of the ones that aren't, like logistics, right? And so when you look at this compared to the internet, I don't really think it's a fair comparison. And this might ruffle some feathers out there, or a lot of people might disagree, but I think AI is more akin to the Industrial Revolution, but here's the real big difference. Instead of spanning 100 years, what if you compress the Industrial Revolution into 5 years or 10 years? What would that have looked like? What would that have done to the world? And that's why this stuff is so important to pay attention to, because the real challenge here is maintaining organizational agility and staying flexible enough to adapt as the pace of AI's capability and all of the change that it's creating accelerates, because it's going to keep accelerating and it's going to keep going faster and the curve is going to keep getting steeper. So on to what we can do, what we can't do. The slide is called Generative AI, Capability and Boundaries. And to deploy AI anywhere, we have to be ruthlessly honest about what it's good at, what it's not so good at. And Today, its primary superpower is its ability to process, analyze, to generate information at speed and scale that you just can't do with human teams. This is a game changer for productivity, right? It can recognize patterns, very subtle patterns across massive, massive data sets. It would take human analysts months and months to discover, and it can do it in a prompt. The interface, right? The natural language interface is pretty critical. This idea that you can have conversations with a machine to get what you want instead of being somebody who knows how to write code is also a massive unlock. And as far as limitations, we already covered the thing about hallucinations. It's pretty critical. It's factually very powerful, but can still confidently deliver things that sound very plausible, but they're incorrect. So we got to verify outputs. Models that really struggle to show how they work. So there's this explainability. This goes all the way into the frontier labs with the people building these actual learning systems. It's very difficult to go into the models and figure out why it gave the answer that it did. That is still a very murky science. Then you got all the human context and novelty that we talked about too, right? AI is trained on past data, and it often struggles with novel or unexpected situations or interpreting subtle nuance. It doesn't really get things like sarcasm or emotional context. It doesn't write very good jokes. So the goal here is to maximize the strengths while building human-in-the-loop processes, right? We always advocate for this being a force multiplier for humans, not a replacement for humans. So how do you do that, right? How do you get it to be a force multiplier for you or your business or your role? We have these four practical pillars of AI. We have, starting off with development enabled, and really this is one of AI's superpowers, like its ability to accelerate the speed and the quality of coding, even the debugging and the testing. And you get more focused teams, and they're going to deliver very complex features at a rate that they couldn't achieve before. You've got the customer-facing integration. So one example of this would be the ultimate layer of personalization, where on the right platform and the right knowledge, say you had an email list of 10,000 recipients and you're going to do a blast and they all get the same message, right? And I don't know what you're going to talk about, your sale that you're having on whatever widget you're making. And instead of sending that same message, you could do all sorts of workflows to have data enrichment about the person that you're sending it to. And with the same efforts, because machines are doing it all, you could have a unique message go out to each one of those 10,000 people based on their social media platforms, based on their LinkedIn profile, based on previous communications. So that is also moving really, really quickly. Workforce optimization. Again, it's just endless examples here. But handling the repetitive, time-consuming tasks or data-intensive tasks, summarizing reports, taking notes, synthesizing research, managing schedules, all the crap that nobody really wants to do, but we have to do, it's already happening, right? We're already solving those use cases, hopefully so that the skilled employees can focus on high-value, creative or strategic, human-centric work, not machine work. Then you've got the future proofing, right? This is the idea of using advanced AI for real deep forecasting, for predictive modeling, for things that humans also haven't necessarily been so great at in the past, right? And that machines can take massive amounts of data and be able to get much better models and take a look ahead to see what is going to happen or how it can help usher you into this next era based on data that you could just never chew through yourself or even with a big team. So how do you start doing all this? Well, I've got this little pyramid slide, and at the base of the three levels of this pyramid, we've got the things we don't like to do. And we already covered some of those things, right? So, again, like capturing the meeting notes, going through a bunch of documents, contracts, or spreadsheets, issue management, customer service, all this stuff that takes an army of people that is really just reading stuff, replying to stuff, moving pixels around a screen, and nobody really likes to do it. Not a lot of controversy here, not a lot of risk, right? Drives immediate time savings for every knowledge worker, shows undeniable value within a 24-hour period. And, any of these examples can save 1 to 3 hours per employee per week instantly, right? So the second tier up in the pyramid, the things we don't do very well. And this is where we really start getting into the conversation of ROI, and eliminating human error at scale. Not eliminating humans, but human error, augmenting humans with superpowers, right? So the good example of this is really monitoring transactions in real time. So flagging abnormal vendor charges or duplicates or policy violations, fraud signals, all of that stuff, it does incredibly well. So yeah, again, humans just can't go and look at thousands of different data points simultaneously and scan them. It just doesn't, it doesn't happen. So way at the tip of the pyramid, we've got the real business changing stuff. And this is where AI stops just saving money and starts making money, right? So if it can learn customer behavior and intent or personalize offers and messaging, if it can optimize itself continuously, offer to be like a personal concierge for everybody that you work with all the time, that is a game changer. That changes everything: revenue, conversions, retention, does upsells, lifetime value. It really starts to build this competitive moat that becomes difficult for others to copy because it's so specific to your business. So when we look at, well, what are the roles that AI plays inside of an organization? We've got these 3 different categories, and they kind of mimic human categories, right? You've got clerks, colleagues, and coaches. And so when we look at clerks, the definition would be, what can AI do that performs like really fast, accurate, and rule-following tasks, right? Think of it as like your intern or executive assistant who just happens to have a PhD in everything in the world and is often just completely free, right? That's what a lot of these AI tools are. So, drafting standardized reports or reviewing documents, extracting data from PDFs, again, basic summaries, low risk, high efficiency augmentation, right? That automates repetitive friction that slows down your organization. Then you've got colleagues, and these are more of collaborators as aside from task doers. And so this might be multi-step workflows and things that need to adapt to context and provide surface level insights, like reviewing compliance patterns in a legal document, right? It's not going to OpenAI won't give you actual hardline legal advice anymore, but it will still review a lot of documents for you. So again, what's the value? Reduces cognitive load, ensures procedural accuracy across complex tasks. And last, we got coaches, and these are AI tools as thinking partners. You could think of this as the most sophisticated form of a partnership. And so this AI helps individual contributors reflect and refine and grow by offering real feedback, alternative suggestions like, hey, do I have any blind spots? What might I be missing here? Can you think of a different angle that I'm not viewing? Can you look at what company XYZ over here is doing? They're my competitor. Can you reverse engineer their marketing plan and then compare it to mine? So this is a real unlock, right? This is elevating human decision-making. It's accelerating professional development. This is the real bridge, the real AI unlock that is what we are hoping to help people move towards to help their roles and the businesses that they run. So this is the beginning of the fun killer slides, the essential enabling conditions that we always talk about, right? We start with an AI manifesto. And what does that mean? Well, you could think of it as like a high-level, ethical, driven, mission-aligned principle for AI use across your whole company. So what are the shared values? What will AI never be used for? This provides a North Star or a bit of a moral compass for the organization as it begins to innovate with AI. Then you've got policy, right? You've got the framework, establishing real governance that is designed to be agile, but still puts guardrails around everything as the technology and regulatory landscape changes. So this goes into continuous compliance or data security or risk mitigation as you deploy these new models in your organization. Then there's the whole cross-organizational literacy. So this is about developing real targeted or role-specific AI training that addresses the needs of everyone from people out in the field to executives and the C-suite. So this makes sure that every part of the organization understands how AI affects their specific job and the organization as a whole. Then you have defined ownership structure. So this is about a cross-functional alignment with very clear accountability for every AI initiative. And it's hopefully going to avoid what we call shadow IT. I'll get a little more into this in a minute. But really a responsible way to maintain these models, the compliance and the outcome for everybody, and move it towards success as opposed to sketchiness. Speaking of, you got safe experimentation zones. So every organization should build some kind of a sandbox environment that has good structured feedback loops for controlled innovation. So you want teams to be able to test and iterate quickly without risking production systems or having a hallucination result in a lawsuit. And that goes into the last one, which is this phased implementation. So prioritizing projects in a very strategic way where you balance two factors. One, on one side, you've got ROI potential, right? The real business win. And then you've got organizational risk, right? The safety factor. So the goal is to launch low risk, high return projects first, because those build momentum. You get these little wins that turn into bigger wins, and then they scale into completely transformative parts of the business. So the ultimate fun killer slide is risk and governance imperatives. And there's this graphic of a giant iceberg. Same graphics that you used in like every business and marketing presentation ever. Unreported AI is the visible part of the iceberg. This is 43% of AI use in these organizations, whereas the bulk of the iceberg sitting concealed under the water is 57%, meaning that out of the 75% of employees using AI, most are doing it very quietly. For a variety of reasons. Some people just see it as this little cheat code, like I've got one up on my colleagues. Oh, they'll never know that I did this whole presentation using AI, or that I don't even reply to my email anymore. My AI agent does it for me. So this gets into really sketchy territory because we mentioned some of the risks or some of the things that AI doesn't really do very well. So when employees use these third-party tools without any guidance whatsoever, or any regulatory or any guidelines, they create things like data leakage or IP exposure, regulatory breaches, things their clients may not want being fed back into a large language model because the user didn't know how to use the appropriate settings. So these risks are happening now because of this unreported usage. And the unreviewed AI drafted documents that may contain non-compliant language get out there, and employees might paste proprietary code or sensitive company data into a public third-party AI tool. It's not good. It's not good. So the goal here is to build governance structures like the ones we were just talking about that encourage responsible use, guided use, make it easy for employees to use the tools, but in a secure way. What does the future hold? What's next in AI, right? Well, some of the things that are starting to come up would be like System 2 AI, the reasoning engines. And this is moving from being the awesome pattern matcher to a deliberate thinker. So this means that a lot of these models are starting to perform these multi-step solutions. They can plan and verify the steps, self-correct their errors. This leads to real complex logic, real complex math, coding problems that were completely out of reach previously. So this is huge, and we're living it right now. Then you've got the agentic workflows. It feels like it's happening a bit slower. I've seen a couple crazy things lately, but nothing like the real promise of 2025 as the year of the agents, where we were going to have this big move from generative AI to the one that will just autonomously navigate our CRM and interact with our calendar and click buttons in our software. I'm starting to see it happen. It's slow, it's expensive, it's super buggy. But again, we'll go back to my slide that just said yet. Hasn't happened yet. It's I've seen some promising markers on the road that say that it's around the corner. Then you've got this infinite context and memory shift. So the future models are going to remember context and preferences across weeks and months, maybe even years, maybe even in perpetuity, as compute keeps getting more powerful and storage keeps getting cheaper. Right now, it's a shortcoming. Context windows keep getting bigger, but I think I've talked about this before. You might be deep in a thread, one of these chats, and it starts getting really slow. And so you start a new chat and it loses all the context of your last chat. A lot of these frontier labs, I've seen this in Gemini, I've seen it in GPT, will pull up context from threads that are completely unrelated, drop in names, examples, circumstances. Like, it's really getting good at this cross-thread contextual referencing. And it's one of those little hints into this just perpetual and unlimited context and memory. Last, we have this native multimodality. And so it's really a move to true omni-perception of the physical world, right? So how do we consume the physical world? It's not just through a text chat, right? We talk. There's audio. We see. There's video. And we can do it all simultaneously. And so these AI models are starting to dynamically interpret all of those inputs so that you don't have to use a model to generate video versus a model to generate an image versus a model to generate a report. Pretty soon, they're all going to be baked into the same model. So the path forward, what do we recommend? What do I tell this MBA class as far as like getting off the presentation, actually doing something? It's really personal application. That's where this all goes. Experiment with it. Start from the bottom of the pyramid, the mundane tasks. What do you hate doing? Have it summarize emails or draft agendas or plan some travel. Build some real AI literacy and intuition. And this is the fastest way to understand its power and its limitations. So the action is, if you look at that iceberg slide with all of the risk, you still also want to be auditing your organization or your role, playing both sides, right? You want to understand the risks and the areas of high employee demand so that you can cut that off at the pass and not let things go off the rails. So what can you do about it? Like, what's a good action item once you are literate and you understand the risks and shortcomings? You can start to pilot things. You can pick 1, 2, or 3 high impact opportunities across those 4 pillars that we talked about. You look at that AI pyramid, right? And the different ways that you can move up. So if you can, again, achieve those quick wins, even in a silo, and then bring them to management or bring them to leadership if you're not running some entity yourself, and prove the ROI of the technology, trust me, it's going to get traction. You're going to get traction in the organization. And then from that, before it gets deployed, of course, you develop that governance framework and the roadmaps, and start to create real stable, compliant foundation that's needed to take something from pilot to true organizational transformation. I also included a slide of some of the things that we use. I'm not even going to rattle off all the foundation models. You know them. I hope by now. We use all of them, and we use the note takers, and we use the dictation platforms. We use the all-in-one brains like ClickUp. We use the coding assistance tools like Cursor and Replit. So that was it. I really hope that you found that helpful. I really hope that this MBA class found that helpful. Again, I went into this with a lot of hesitation of explaining what a large language model is and where this tech came from, kind of assuming that everybody was as deep in the weeds as Kevin and I are. That's not the case. It's not the case. So one of the messages I left them with is, if you aren't using it, if you're not familiar, if you're not literate, it's not too late. And just because you hear about it a lot in the news, or it's coming up in your RSS feed all the time, or you hear about it in podcasts and news stories, it doesn't mean it's too late. We are early. We are super, super early with all of this. So if you start now, it's going to be a superpower for you next year, the year after that, the year after that, because if you go back to this Supercycle graph, we are just on the approach to a straight up trajectory. Thanks. I hope this helps you use AI at work, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to send us a question to answer on the show, email me at elijah@spark6.com. That is SPARK, the number 6.com, or Kevin at ascendlabs.ai. To learn more about AI strategy and training for your business, visit Kevin's company, Ascend AI Labs, at ascendlabs.ai. And to learn more about design and development of custom AI solutions, visit my agency at spark6.com. You can also sign up for my free newsletter, AI Framework Friday, by visiting spark6.com/newsletter.